So today I'll be making an epic superhero cake. Now if you want to see a quick time lapse of how I made that cake, go ahead and click above on that pop-up. But if you want to see the actual tutorial step-by-step of how I made the cake, then you're in the right spot. Just go ahead and grab some coffee, take a seat. I'll be starting off with the materials that I'll be using to make the cake toppers. Just the beginning of that. I mean, there's gonna be other materials that I'll be using along the way. But for the basics, as you can see, I have my surface ready. Now I've seen others use confectioner's sugar, but I like to use freezer paper. This is my favorite because it keeps my countertops clean. I don't get any food dye staining my countertops. And also I'll be using this to trace templates for the superhero decals. So freezer paper, my ultimate favorite. I just taped it down. Next thing we'll be needing rolling pin, edible marker, scissors, X-Acto knife, food gels, vodka, my handy dandy measuring tape, a cooling rack. For the Captain America, I'll be using a star cookie cutter. For the Hulk, I'll be using some sculpting tools. Also not in the picture, but very importantly, I'll be using fondant as my primary decorating material. Also, I'll be using a 14-inch cake that's not baked yet. I'll be using like a turntable. I'll be using royal icing and buttercream. So there's gonna be a lot of materials that I'll be using throughout, as you may see, but this is primarily what I'll need to get started. So this is my cake dummy. As I mentioned, my cake isn't baked yet, so I'm making these decorations ahead of time. But this is a 14-inch and I divided it into 4. That's how the design is going to be. So for this first square, let's measure and see. Well, it's not square, it's a pizza shape. Let's measure and see how big the decoration should be. I think 4 by 4 would be a good size for each section. Alright, so now that we know how big we want our decorations to be, I found images online that I'll be tracing using my freezer paper and food coloring marker to trace the exact shape that I need those decorations to be. Now, I conveniently already have Photoshop. I know there's a lot of other free softwares and programs that you can use to resize your images however size you need. This is my method and hopefully it helps some of you. Pretty self-explanatory, but with the freezer paper that I'll be using, the shiny side is actually going to be face down, and the matte side is where I'll be tracing the logo. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is I want the shiny side to be pressed up against the fondant so the fondant doesn't stick. If you try putting the matte side downward towards the fondant, once it's rolled out, it's definitely going to stick. So this will just make your life a heck of a lot easier. And also the marker doesn't really stay on the shiny glossy side either. Alright, so essentially we end up with something like this. So that'll be our template. So I have my red fondant rolled out and we're gonna start cutting out the Ironman logo. So remember, shiny glossy side face down. I got my handy dandy X-Acto knife. Now I do like to actually save these templates, but this one I can't save just because it's multi-layer and I'm gonna end up chopping it up and whatnot. But for like the Spiderman, you guys will see that it's just a single, simple one layer. And I'll be saving that one for next time. Okay, so now we can peel this right off. Ta-da! So that's our basic shape. And now let's cut out the green spots so we could do the yellow markings. So I have a little bowl of water over here on the side, so I can go ahead and glue down my little pieces as I go. This is when my sculpting tools come in handy, so I can tuck in any little corners that are not clean, that might have a little bit of extra fondant sticking out. I want to make sure that I have enough spacing in between the yellow parts so it doesn't mesh together and you can see like clear outlines. It's just a lot prettier that way. Home stretch. So again, you see these little edges. I like to, as much as I can, I like to tuck those in. Again, it just gives it a cleaner look when all of that's tucked in. But next up, we have the white fondant for the eyes. So lastly, I got one of his eyeballs ready to cut out. Now, as I said, I can't save this Ironman template because it's just, look at it, it's just trash now. But for the Spiderman, see, got little leggies. But I'll be able to save this one and throw it with the rest of my pile of other templates that I've done in the past. And now I'm gonna put this to dry on the cooling rack and on to the next one. I rolled out my fondant a little bit thicker for the Spider-Man logo just because he has delicate little leggies. And I think it'll be easier to move him around if we have thicker fondant cut out. I would roll down any pieces when you pull away so that it doesn't rip away. I guess I could try piping this as well on the template with frosting or with chocolate. Haven't tried that method, but I guess that would be another option you could try. All right, so there we go. I'm going to slip him onto this freezer paper. Since it's so delicate right now, I don't want to run the risk. But once I do that, once it's dry on the upside, then I'll go ahead and flip them over. For these little edges that are a little wonky, I'm just holding it in between my fingertips to apply some heat so it can straighten back out. Okay, 2 down, 2 more to go. So next up we have Captain America. You don't need to buy circular cookie cutters of all shapes and sizes. You just need to look in your kitchen, and honestly, any lid, any cup, you will find that it will be so helpful and it'll be everything that you needed. So I just used a cup for the size that I needed to cut out Captain America's shield. And for the center, this is actually a lid to one of my sprinkles. And that looks pretty centered. So let's push that down. There we go. Okay, so to actually paint the red stripes, we are going to use a drop of red food gel and some vodka to water it down. Some of you are like, woo! But actually, this vodka will evaporate, so nay. The odds of you getting tipsy on your 10-year-old nephew's birthday cake is highly unlikely. Never use water to water down your food coloring, because if you try to use water, that will actually eat away at your fondant. If you do mess up, no worries. Just dip some vodka in a Q-tip and then you can like brush away at any parts that you messed up. Alright, so our center is the blue fondant. Make sure you tidy up your edges, get rid of any excess. Use your body heat to melt back in any extra little scrappy scraps that are floating along the edge. I actually don't have a star cutter that was as big as I wanted it to be, so I just flattened out a little more the star and trying to shape it to the size that I want it to be. Carefully lift this up because your paint is still wet. And then we'll transfer that also to cooling rack. Alright, so I know that initially I mentioned that I'll be using Rice Krispies. Well, change of plans. I'm just going to use nothing but fondant for the Hulk fist. Now you can use modeling chocolate as well, but that's just my preference right now at the moment. With Hulk, I mean, he has a fist, and thankfully I have a fist that I can use as reference. Yeah, let's do that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to roll out a bit of fondant. I'm gonna keep this bottom part a little bit thicker because this is the palm and these are gonna be the fingers. The middle finger is the longest one. So that's gonna be my thumb. And then let's do the fingers. 1, 2. This one's actually longer than this one, but it's probably not. It's probably just me. 4. And our pinky. 5. And we'll save the rest for the wrist. And I also have my sculpting tool, so make that ridge right there. And then we got these lines as well. Line there, line there. Line there. Here. The thumb has one like this. And then there's also lines up here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then this part is a lot more thicker, so it's kind of just push down to create that shape. Like so. And then I'm just trying to round off these fingers so they don't have like these straight edges from where I just cut it. I think maybe we can start folding them down. We'll add details later, but we do have like the wrinkles from where we bend, the wrinkles on our knuckles. Okay, so I have a boba straw and I'm just gonna put some pressure to change the shape to make it less circular. And that'll give me a perfect indentation for the nails. Ta-da! Okay. And I'll use black paint in a bit to make these wrinkles more obvious. For now, I think that's looking pretty decent. It reminds me of those fists. Was it a fist or was it a hand that the ice cream man would sell? With the gum in the middle, the bubble gum in the middle. Do you guys remember that? No? Okay. Some lines there. Lines over here. I'm gonna stand this up a little. I'm going to keep molding back here to give them some knuckles shape definition. Okay, let's create the wrist. Okay, so I added my wrist and I did add a little bit of water and then just using my fingers tugging upward so that, oops, my wrist stays in place. Am I holding this backwards? I don't know. Sorry in advance if I am. Okay, so now let me go ahead and I got some black paint. I'm just gonna add some definition around the nails and on the wrinkles to give it more of that comic look. Let's go ahead and add some of those kind of veins that you get when you make a fist. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I might mess with it a little bit further till I'm happy with it. But next what'll happen is that I will get one of these kebab sticks and I will push through now to create a hole, so that way I don't try doing this once it's dry and it's harder for me to make a hole through it, but this will be standing. Okay, so I'm pretty content with my fist at this point. So now I am going to dry it upright so that way my bottom is nice and flat and that way it's perfectly balanced by the time I do place it on top of my cake. And that's everything for our preparations ahead of time for our superhero cake. Now I have my cake nice and baked. This is a funfetti cake. So let's go ahead and ice this baby up and we'll be ready to start decorating. Yay! Meanwhile, the cake is cooling down in the fridge with the icing I just placed. I am going to make another template, and yes, I should have done this a lot earlier, but I didn't think about it till now. So, remember how I have my sections already up here that I used for my toppings? Well, let's kind of do that, but this time it's going to be for the fondant. So I know exactly what angles each section needs to be, so it fits perfectly fine on the top of the cake. So I have a piece of freezer paper and I'm just going to trace the outside. My motto is work smarter, not harder. If you guys know of an easier way to do this, by all means, place it on the comments below. Okay, so now that I have my circle, let's fold it in half. Perfect, and now in half again. There we go, so this will be my template when I'm cutting each section of the fondant, plus the 5 inches. Let's start with Ironman first. So I'm going to roll out my fondant and then use the template to stick onto our cake. So I'm using my template to see where it fits on the cake. So I'm gonna tug it a little bit further down. There we go, this should do. Perfect. Remember our Hulk fist? He is actually going to be ripping through the fondant. So when you look into the fondant, I don't want to see that white frosting. So I'm going to do a little bit of peekaboo purple. And I will roll this out super thinly, but this one is going to go underneath the green section on our cake. You know what, where's my front? All right, keep that in mind. Know where your ends are. I was holding it backwards. Okay, that fits well. You know what, I forgot to put the purple peekaboo. We want our fist here. Then let's do the purple here. There we go. Okay, so I can see the spot where I put my purple peekaboo. So let's go ahead and cut through for that faux tear. Oh, isn't that so pretty? Just that pop of color. And then I'll clean away where I messed up all this buttercream. But our fist will go here. Ta-da! That'll come in later. I'm gonna finish this off first. To make my ribbon, I'm going to be using this tool. I don't even know the name, ribbon slicer. But I am going to make my ribbon 1/2 inch in width. And what I love about this tool is probably the best tool that has been gifted to me, is that you can adjust however big you want the width to be of your ribbon or rectangle shapes, and also you can change the edges if you want wavy edges or if you want straight edges. So according to our calculations, remember, going to make this ribbon 1/2 inch in width and about 19-20 inches in length. Let me go ahead and wet where I'll be gluing down the ribbon so it has something to stick onto. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife to cut this edge right there. And then we have one more to go and we can start doing the fun part of actually decorating, adding on our decorations. I will be frosting the Spiderman web with chocolate frosting that was dyed black, so it's gonna be super delicious. And I'll be using a Wilton 7 tip. So as you can see with this web, I am squeezing the icing bag, pulling up, and I'm creating this U, kind of like a half circle or U shape in between each section. Alright, so that section is almost done. I just need to add the topper. Awesome. Okay, so this one is practically done. I just need to add the logo. Let's add a little bit of water on our backside to help Ironman stick. That section's done. Let's move on to Captain America, where I will be adding some red and white squares along the side. So for my square border, I will be using this small little square cookie cutter. I don't recommend that you hand eyeball these squares because trust me, they're gonna come out wonky, uneven. So I ended up buying that square cookie cutter for that reason. Piece of resistance. Boop. All right, and lastly, we got our Hulk. Okay, so for a Hulk, remember we have our kebab skewer to hold it up in place. So it's gonna sit right about here is where I need to cut my kebab stick. Also, I'll be adding some wet fondant at the bottom, just as extra glue. Push that in. Oh my gosh, that looks awesome. Please, please, please make sure you let anyone know when you make a cake where you have any hidden toothpicks, straws. That is so important for them to know so they don't smash their face or try to bite into something that has a toothpick. Okay, so that is our superhero cake. Comment below who is your favorite superhero. For me, I would have to choose, bam, Captain America.